Good to see
Good to see you too.
you. It's been a long time. How many? Do you remember the exact date of this thing?
Yes,
13 years ago.
13 years ago. I'm a mother of two, proud mother of two. I have many titles, but one of my most precious titles is donor grandmother. I'm a grandmother to three, but my firstborn grandson, Malachi, was born in 2010. And I was so happy to bring in a grandson and to have a child that was my son's child. And so we were really excited. We were hoping, we had so many hopes and wishes and dreams for him. Daniel was excited to be a dad. He always wanted to, he loved children. That was the one thing that he was looking forward to, was being a dad. Malachi was born in 2010.
How old was
We
Daniel?
welcomed Daniel was 19, was it 18, 19 years old. He was a very young dad. When both the mom and Daniel came to us, we were excited, a little concerned. They were so young, but I did it as a young parent too, so I knew that they would have plenty of help from both sides of the family. So we were excited. And so when baby Malachi was born, to be able to hold him in my arms was just so beautiful. To see Daniel with his little baby, he just lit up. That was his little boy. So unfortunately, the kids, they were together for about a year, and for reasons they know, they split up. And Daniel made certain that the baby's mom knew that he wanted to be a dad, and they agreed to continue to, allow Daniel to be in his child's life. So, unfortunately, like a lot of a lot of circumstances, that changed when the mother started another relationship with someone, and Daniel was not allowed to have a relationship with his son, and so that went on for many months. We were able to be with Malachi on his first birthday. And so to be able to not see Malachi for a few months and to be with him again, my son's concern was, will my son know who I am? And once he picked him up, and they both connected, it was like no time was lost. And so that was a hope that maybe things were going to change. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And Daniel was not allowed to have a relationship. In him not having a relationship, I was not able to have a relationship with my grandson either. So Daniel chose to start the court process to file for visitation. And that was, an ongoing process when I received a call in the middle of the night, which said, "Get your son to the hospital. There's been an accident." I rushed to the hospital. I called Daniel and I told Daniel, "You need to get to the hospital. I don't know what's going on, but you need to get there." I got to the hospital first. I saw my grandson, my perfect, beautiful, giggly, happy little grandson in a neck brace and bruises on his head. And I couldn't understand how the last time we saw him, he was so happy and healthy, and here he is, laying in a hospital crib. I got the phone call that Daniel was at the hospital, and I met him at the elevator, trying to prepare him for what he was about to see. Unfortunately, you can't prepare someone for that. Daniel and I went to the nurse's station, and Daniel asked if he could go into the room. At that time, the nurses said no, the parents are in the room, and they denied Daniel access to his child. Um, of course, we got upset, and because we were in the middle of visitation, I carried Malachi's birth certificate in my purse. And so I presented that to the nurses, and immediately they allowed Daniel to go into the room. Um, as we entered the room, the baby's mom and the boyfriend were in the room, and my son broke down at the sight of his little baby. And I remember squeezing his little hand and squeezing his little feet, trying to find some sort of life because he was in a coma. And that wasn't to happen. State of California requires 3 tests to be done to declare somebody brain dead. And at the time that Malachi was declared brain dead, um, with there was lullabies playing in the background, and I distinctly remember "You Are My Sunshine" playing in the background, and that was the last lullaby I remember hearing. Malachi would be declared brain dead shortly thereafter. At that time, the CPS had gotten involved. The doctors and the nursing staff understood that this was not accidental. And the moment Malachi was declared brain dead, his case went from accidental to homicide. At that point, you, as our One Legacy representative, approached my son and the baby's mom in regards to organ donation. And to my recollection, I believe they said yes right away. And the process began. I was able to take my son home after 3 days. He was in the hospital from morning to night every single one of those days that Kai was in the hospital because there he could not be denied access to his child. So on that third day, we took him back home. The following morning, we woke up to sheriff's detectives at our home, and they wanted to question my son in regards to baby Kai. And we told them, the struggles that we had with visitation and such, and they also informed us that this had turned into a homicide. And they, in turn, suggested that the organ donation process not proceed. They spoke to Daniel and said in the removal of the organs that evidence could be tampered with. And we didn't think about that at the time because for us, somebody was going to be held accountable. We had every intention on fighting for justice for Malachi. And so my son called you and explained to you that he no longer wanted to move forward with the organ donation process. And LACUSC called us at that point and said, "Come and say your goodbyes to the baby because since he was no longer going to be an organ donor, we need to say our goodbyes." So we caravanned with a police escort to the hospital. And I remember distinctly walking into the room, and you introduced yourself to me, and you asked why Daniel had chosen to, to halt the donation process. And I explained to you that this was a homicide. And you explained to me that you could put me in contact with the coroner, and you did so. I spoke to the coroner. They confirmed that they would not be removing an organ. They had done this numerous times during a homicide investigation. And so I remember you going into the room with us and in a closed room. And I remember how loving and compassionate you were. And you spoke to my son and said, this is your decision. Um, I'm here if you have any questions, concerns. And I remember sitting in silence for a while and just talking to Daniel. I didn't know where his heart was. I know his heart was raw and broken, and just the thought of having to make a huge decision like that was not something that he felt comfortable to do. But I remember telling my son that no matter what his decision, we would be there for him. And like I said, we sat for a while, and my son, the only thing he wanted was to make sure that Malachi's story would be able to help somebody else. He was thinking of other children because at that point we believed that there was just children that he could be able to save. So he changed his decision to yes, and we were grateful, and the organ donation process was able to move forward. So I remember the hospital allowed him and the baby's mom to have some time with Malachi. And so my son was able to hold him and cradle him. And I remember sitting at the end of this long hallway, and it was just white. Everything was white, cold. And I remember seeing my son walk through the double doors, and I locked eyes with my son, and he collapsed to the floor. And all I could do as a mom was run to him. And we both sat on the floor and we both held each other. And I told him that it would be okay. And so I remember bringing him to our family, and we all prayed together because we know that our faith was going to get us through. Our faith was always going to get us through. So baby Malachi went on to save the lives of 4 people. He saved a 9-month-old with his liver. A 2-year-old little girl received his heart. A 21-year-old received his right kidney, and a 65-year-old received his left kidney. The fact that our baby at 16 months old was able to save the lives of 2 adults was unfathomable to us, and I later came to learn that the kidney grows to a recipient size. And so that was, I never understood the terminology, um, collateral beauty until this happened to us. Because to be able to know that other people are out there living these beautiful lives today because of that life-saving decision, it's just a beautiful ending to such a horrific story. I call his story Hope After Tragedy because that's exactly what it is. He brought hope to these 4 families that were desperately seeking a life-saving transplant.
Incredible. I remember. I, I I can remember the feeling more of than you know the interaction with Daniel. I mean, I remember looking at him and he was just there was there was nothing there, and I sensed, I guess what I felt was anger, sadness, um, just pain, and it was almost like he couldn't make a decision, like you said, like he was being told one thing by the detectives and telling them to not do this so that they could do an investigation, but I knew that it was different, uh, which is why he didn't need to hear it from me. You didn't need to hear it from me. You needed to hear it directly from the coroner's office,
Yes.
which is why I made the phone calls and hoped that it would help because I knew that I think a lot of times people perceive, you know, when we present the opportunity for donation, they think it's something that we're looking to take, like we just want to take these organs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the challenge is always, how can I change the perception and help you understand that I'm actually offering you something too?
Right.
Um, it's kind of a hard balance to maintain sometimes, especially in a situation where it looks like we're, you know, almost begging,
Yeah.
but because we know the outcome and not just for the other side, for the recipient, but for the families, because it truly is it's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift for everyone
Mm-hmm.
in such a terrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing too is that it's hard to see that. It's hard to see the future and what that would look like or feel like in that moment. So
Yeah.
I think that when I explain to people like what I do, it's perception, and because when you present somebody with the opportunity to donate, right, it can be perceived in different ways. It can be perceived as, basically it's 3 different ways that people, the perception people have of donation. It's either negative, positive, or indifferent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you've never had an experience with it, you may be indifferent, or you may maybe you've heard of it and it could be positive. Maybe you've had a first-hand experience with it, and it's positive, but it could also be negative. It could
Yeah.
be based on things that, you know, people hear, and there's so much that's going around now in terms of, negative, like negative perceptions of donation, because, the news's job is to sensationalize,
Yes.
and it's usually sensationalized when it comes to organ donation, it's sensationalized in the negative.
Hmm.
I wish they would realize that there really is a way to sensationalize it
Right.
for the positive,
Right.
because like anything, I'm sure there are negative experiences, but I think for the most part, it is positive.
For sure.
Um, but the collateral beauty comment, I think, is perfect,
Hmm.
uh, because it really is like in the middle of this tragedy lies this opportunity that's just, it's hard to see, it's hard to
Yeah.
conceptualize, especially when something like this comes to fruition, right?
Yeah.
You know, a 2-year-old
Yeah.
that received his heart. Can
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. We're blessed to know the 2-year-old that received his little heart. She was 2.5 years old when she was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, and she lived her life in a hospital setting most of her life. So to be able to see her living life today, she was able to go to school, to kindergarten, all of these things that she was never expected to do. And today she's running marathons. She's running marathons. Her and her mom just visited the Capitol in Washington for Family Day, Legislative Day, for the importance of children's hospitals. And she's giving back to her community because she's so grateful to baby Malachi. I saw her, I want to say it was a camp where she spoke about Malachi, and you hear her voice choking up. She knows the beauty of what she's received, and she's a beautiful young lady with a heart that goes beyond being golden, but she's now one little heart joined both of these families together. One heart is now beating for two. And although my grandson, I can sit and I can live my life with rage and anger and bitterness because of what happened to my grandson, but I choose not to. I choose to allow my heart to be pliable, allow my heart to be continuously loving. And because as a woman of God, I know that God knew the number of my grandson's days. And he was born to be a hero to these four families. And I remember sitting in the hospital when he was still, um, he had not been declared brain dead. And I remember sitting in the hospital and just praying for my grandson, just praying, praying, praying that God would open up his little eyes and that he would be brought back to us. I knew the extent of his injuries. Baby Malachi was beaten and suffered 21 head injuries and was rendered blind. So I couldn't even imagine what kind of life our baby could have lived. So, in the midst of all that, I prayed for God's will, whatever that would be, whether Malachi would come back to us or whether, the Lord would take him. But as I sit back today and I look at the beauty that came out of it, that, I pray for our miracle, of course, but our miracle was not granted. But once that fog of grief lifted, I realized there were miracles. God supersized it for four families, for those families that were desperately seeking life for their loved ones, and so their miracles were granted, and I'm okay with that because knowing having to sit through trial was 2.5 years. It was a 2.5 year fight for justice, almost 40 court appearances back and forth. Our lives literally stopped because we wanted to make sure that justice would be served. And so I felt at that point that I couldn't even grieve my grandson because we're having to go back and forth and look at the young man that did this to our baby. And we learned a lot in trial. Malachi was was um was being abused. And so for us, it's, I'm grateful, and people don't understand when I say this, but I'm grateful that his story, that the Lord took him, because I don't want any child, much less my grandson, to be abused. So, Malachi's story, as I said, is a story of hope after tragedy, and he's just another face to the beauty of organ donation, and to be able to witness this 2-year old who's just doing all of these things in his honor, is just so beautiful. His 21-year-old recipient, who received his kidney, she's able to travel, and be with her family and make new memories. So it's in their stories that we find that hope after tragedy. So I began my own healing in this process. And 2 years after this happened, I became a One Legacy ambassador. And because I found purpose in doing what I did. And so to be able to be in a community of other ambassadors where we all have stories, whether it's transplant, whether it's donor, we all have a commonality, and that's the beauty of organ donation. So I recently went to Sacramento and was able to share my story with legislators, and it was just it has given me healing. I'm always going to be a bereaved grandmother. That's always going to be who I am, but it's not the totality of the person that I am. I chose to extend forgiveness to this young man that did this to my grandson. And I know that's not of me. I know that that's of the God that lives inside me, because I had to remind myself that, Christ went to the cross for him as well. So I have to, for me, that's my story. I don't speak for my son. He, he, he still has a lot of pain, and that pain will forever be with him. The loss of his firstborn. God blessed him with two more. He's got two more kids, and Danny is 11, and Alyssa is 5, and they run him crazy, but he loves it. He loves being a dad. And I remember when Danny was born, he says, "Mom, God's giving me a second chance, to be a dad." And he loves his little family, and I'm just forever grateful um, that we do have that Malachi was in our lives, even if it was for a short while. And today I know the importance of pictures. I know the importance of video. I know the importance of being present, because of tragedy. But it's been a hard journey. But we continue to move forward as a family, and always remember our baby. He's always going to be in our lives. So yeah, it's a
Huge
beautiful.
blessing.
For sure, for sure.
Such a huge blessing. And the fact that, I mean, that's something that I try to relate to families too, is that, you know, you're in this situation where you're praying for a miracle. You're asking God, you're begging God for a miracle. And if you could consider that God is answering your prayer, it just looks different than how you asked for it.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, and with that comes so many blessings too. Again, it's hard to see in the moment,
Yeah.
because Malachi was the miracle,
Yeah.
is the miracle.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I think for me, because when I talk with families, I see them in the moment over the course of several hours, maybe a couple days. But
Right.
after that, it's not often that I, get to follow up and see how are
Right.
they doing. So this means so much to me. So thank you for sharing that. And I
Yeah.
think it's important because whether it's people who work in family care like I do, they need to hear it.
Yeah.
They need to know this. They
Yeah.
need to know the other side of it. It's what gives us purpose. It's what helps us keep moving forward,
Yeah.
and not giving up even when we're
Yeah. Weary.
denied or rejected, or
Yeah.
uh, you get lashed out at
Yeah.
a lot, but you know you don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's really really important for just the population in general to hear, to see. I mean, because it's such a like an exclusive kind of view of like the big picture,
Right.
uh, starting in the eye of tragedy and just kind of moving forward and how you can evolve.
Yeah.
But you said something very um, poignant too, which is it's your choice. You choose
Yeah.
to live that way, and
Hmm.
you know, I think a lot of times we don't truly believe that it is a choice.
Yeah.
This is just what we're handed, and this is where we live, and this is um, so the positivity I think is extremely valuable I think to a lot of people.
For sure.
So thank you for sharing.
For sure. For sure. Our family will always hold you in high regard. I think you underestimate the role that you played in Malachi's story. And that's why, I'm grateful to still continue to have you in my life and, to be able to say thank you. I remember years ago when we ran into each other, I was like, whoa, But this today is a full circle moment for me,
Yeah,
and it's emotional because it instantly took me back to that tragedy, and but you know it takes a special person to do what you do, and you know you can't teach compassion, you can't teach um, being able to, even though you don't know exactly firsthand what that person's going through, to be able to be a calm voice, to be encouraging, to be compassionate. You just can't teach that. So to be able to have you there in that moment and to continue to see that you're doing what you're doing, it's a beautiful thing. And I know that you're touching families every single day, and your job can sometimes be thankless, right? And from this donor grandma, if you don't hear thank yous very often, know that we care about you, we appreciate you, and I'll continue to pray that you continue to that God gives you the strength and the perseverance to do what you do, because this is your gift. God gives us all gifts, and this is yours to do what you're doing. So we're grateful for you. We're grateful.
and that thank you goes a long